Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Emily Morrison's life unravels when she discovers her ex-husband, Charles, flaunting his new relationship with Emily, a woman from their circle in their family mansion. Confronted by the betrayal, Emily finds unexpected support in Charles's mother, Gloria, who reveals hidden truths about Charles's past affairs. With Gloria's help, Emily gains the strength to walk away and rebuild her life for herself and her children. Through heartache and healing, Emily learns to forgive, reclaiming her strength and finding hope in a future that no longer includes the man who betrayed her. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest stories. It all started on a crisp autumn evening when I got a call from my daughter, Sarah, with words that would haunt me forever. "Mum, Dad's having a party at the mansion tonight. He's bringing someone. Her name is Emily." My heart sank, and the world around me seemed to blur. My ex-husband, Charles, had moved on. It wasn't the fact that he'd moved on that stunk, it was how he was doing it, so publicly, so shamelessly. After all these years, all the love we'd shared, all the years of raising our children together, he had chosen to flaunt his affair with Emily in the most humiliating way possible. In the mansion that we had once called home, I had always known something was off in our marriage before everything collapsed. Charles had changed, becoming distant, disconnected. Our once vibrant conversations dwindled into silence. His late-night hours, his secretive behavior, and the unexplained absences of the puzzle I had tried to ignore. But when he told me he was leaving, I had tried to keep it together, for our children, for the legacy of the love we once had. However, nothing prepared me for this moment, walking into our home to face the woman who had been in my life for years but never in my heart, Emily. I had never met Emily in person, but I knew her by reputation. She was a friend of one of our mutual acquaintances, someone who had been around during the cracks in my marriage, someone Charles had spent more and more time with. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was her boldness that left me shaken. She had always seemed like the type of woman who thrived on drama, who reveled in causing trouble, and now she was playing the role of the other woman, unashamed, standing in the mansion that I had once cherished with Charles. As I pulled up to the mansion, I noticed a strange calmness in my chest. Anger, bitterness, those emotions were fleeting. What overwhelmed me was a deep sadness. The realization that everything I had built with Charles, everything I had loved, was no longer mine. This house, these memories, had become a stage for a new chapter in his life. And I was an outsider now. When I walked through the front doors of the mansion, I couldn't help but feel like an intruder. The sight of Emily laughing with Charles, her hand resting possessively on his arm, was almost too much to bear. But, as I took a step forward, preparing myself to confront him, a sudden presence behind me froze me in my tracks. It was Charles' mother. Gloria had always been a constant in my life, someone who had welcomed me into the family with open arms. She had been like a second mother to me. But after the divorce, I hadn't heard much from her. Her silence had been almost as painful as Charles' betrayal. And yet, there she stood now, behind me, her face serene, with eyes that held a mixture of wisdom and sorrow. "Gloria," I whispered, unsure of what to expect. She didn't say a word, but motioned for me to follow her into the library. As we entered the quiet room, Gloria closed the door gently behind us. There was a heavy silence in the air before she spoke. "You know, I never wanted this for you," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted to see you in pain. Not after everything we shared, I thought. I thought he would change. But I see now, Charles is beyond redemption." I looked at her, shocked. "What are you saying, Gloria?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "There's something you need to know about Charles, ... Something you never knew. Something I've been keeping from you for years." I was frozen. Her words felt like the calm before a storm, and the anxiety built in my chest as she continued. "See, after your daughter was born, Charles changed. He became more distant, more preoccupied with his image, with what the world thought of him. And I never understood why. But then I found out, long before you did, about his affair. And it wasn't just with Emily. There were others." My breath caught in my throat. "What, you knew?" "Yes," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I knew, but I couldn't bring myself to tell you. You had already been through so much, and I thought that if you knew the full truth, it would break you. But it's clear now that it's too late to protect you. He's made his choices." The words hit me like a slap in the face. The betrayal wasn't. Just his, it was also hers, for keeping this secret from me, for letting me live in the lie. But there was more, much more. "Gloria, why are you telling me this now? Why not before?" Her eyes grew distant as she looked down at the floor. "Because, my dear, I don't want you to think you're the problem. You were never the problem. Charles ... He lost his way a long time ago. I tried to reach him, but he was too consumed by his own ego, his own desires. And now," she paused, her voice faltering, "now it's too late." I felt the weight of her words settle heavily on my heart. The realization that I had been living in a toxic marriage for so long, trying to make it worked, while Charles had been tearing it apart behind my back, was almost too much to bear. But even as the pain of betrayal washed over me, I realized something within myself. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. Not anymore. Gloria's voice snapped me back to the moment. "I'm not here to make excuses, but I need you to know something important, something I can never undo. You deserve better than this. You always have." Just as I was about to respond, we heard voices from the hall after, the clinking of glasses. It was Charles and Emily. They were coming closer. Gloria turned to me, her expression soft but resolute. "You don't have to face him, not like this. You've given him everything you had. It's time to walk away with your head held high." And in that moment, everything shifted. I stood there, in the mansion that was once mine, no longer a wife, no longer a mother in the way I had once defined myself. But I wasn't defeated, I wasn't broken, and I was no longer willing to let Charles' choices define my worth. As they entered the room, I stood tall, facing him for the first time in months. His eyes met mine, and for a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of guilt. But it was quickly replaced by the smugness I had come to expect. Emily, ever the actress, smiled at me, but her smile faltered when she saw Gloria standing beside me. "This is over, Charles," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was shattering. "I won't play this game anymore. Not with you, not with her." His face contorted with anger, but Gloria, who had been silent throughout most of the encounter, finally spoke. "Enough," she said firmly. "It's time you realized that you've lost everything that truly mattered. And it's time you faced the consequences of your actions." For the first time, Charles' confidence wavered. The man who had once controlled everything seemed small in that moment. And for the first time, I realized that the strength I had always sought in him was never really there. As I walked out of the mansion, leaving the past and Charles behind, I felt something I hadn't in years. Freedom. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need the mansion, the memories, or the false sense of security. I was stronger than I had ever been, and now I was ready to move forward. No longer bound by betrayal, no longer shackled by love that had faded. I was walking away from the man I once loved and the life we once built. And this time I was doing it for me. The air outside had grown chilly, and the sharp contrast between the warmth of the mansion and the crisp autumn air hit me like a wave. I walked out into the night, needing space, needing air to breathe, without the weight of betrayal heavy on my chest. As I stepped down the stone pathway, the sounds of laughter and music from the party drifted out from behind me. I tried to push them out of my mind, but they clung to me like a thick fog. I had always prided myself on being the one who held things together. My entire life had been about balancing work, family, love, and home. I was the kind of person who found fulfillment in simple things: a home-cooked meal, a hug from my children, long walks in the park. But with each passing day since the divorce, those simple pleasures had felt like fragile things, lost in the wake of all the complexities that Charles had thrust into my life. And now, standing there on the edge of this mansion, all I could feel was the gaping emptiness that had followed me through these past months. As I stood there, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew it was Sarah. She had been quiet during the whole ordeal, unsure of how to navigate this new reality where her father, her hero, was no longer the man she thought he was. Her texts had been short, filled with confusion, hurt, and sometimes anger. She had even asked me if I still loved him, if I still cared about what was happening, as if hoping for some thread of reassurance that we could still be a family. I took a deep breath before answering. I wanted to be strong for her, to show her that even though everything was falling apart around us, we would be okay, that we would find our way through this together. "Mum, are you okay?" The text read. I swallowed hard, feeling my chest tighten. She had to be asking if I was okay for more than just the usual reason. I could hear the unspoken question in her words. Was I okay with everything that had happened? Was I okay with the man her father had become? I replied, trying to sound calm, trying to reassure her that I was handling it, even though every part of me was torn. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I just need some time to think. We'll talk soon, I promise." I didn't want to burden her with the complexities of what had just transpired, with what I had learned about Charles' betrayals, about the lies he had spun not only to me but to the people who loved him. I didn't want her to know that the father she had idolized had become someone I no longer recognized. But in my heart, I knew she would have to face the truth someday. Children always find out, eventually. As I stood there, the chill of the night starting to bite at my skin, I realized that I couldn't just stand there forever. I needed to do something. I needed to make sure I wasn't going to drown in this grief and anger. I couldn't afford to let it swallow me whole. I had already lost so much: my marriage, my peace of mind, my future with Charles. But I still had my children. I still had my own strength. I turned back towards the mansion, steeling myself for whatever came next. I had already had my confrontation with Charles, but there was one person left I needed to speak with. Gloria. I walked back. Inside, the sounds of the party growing louder with each step. I made my way through the halls, avoiding the guests who still milled about. unaware of the quiet storm brewing beneath the surface. The mansion felt so foreign to me now. The life I once shared with Charles seemed like a distant memory, a different lifetime. The halls, the rooms, everything we had built together now felt like an illusion. A facade, I found Gloria in the drawing room, her back turned to me as she stared out the window. She looked almost peaceful, as if she had come to terms with everything in a way I had not yet been able to. "Gloria," I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting mine with an unreadable expression. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if the words we needed to say to each other hung heavy in the air, trapped between us, unwilling to escape. "I never wanted this for you," Gloria said finally, her voice soft, regretful. "I never wanted you to go through this pain. I should have told you sooner." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. My emotions were still raw, still too close to the surface. Instead, I moved closer to her, sitting down on the arm of the couch, the weight of the night pressing down on my shoulders. "I know, Gloria," I said quietly. "I know, but it's hard to process it all. I spent so many years trying to save something that was already broken." Her eyes softened, and she reached out, placing a hand gently on mine. "You weren't the one who broke it, my dear. Charles was always broken in ways you couldn't see. He was never the man you thought he was, not for a long time." The truth in her words stung, but it also offered a strange sense of relief. For so long, I had blamed myself, questioning where I had gone wrong, what I could have done differently to save our marriage. But now, standing there with Gloria, I saw things more clearly. The blame was not mine to carry. It had never been. "Where do I go from here, Gloria?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How do I even start over?" Gloria smiled softly, a knowing look in her eyes. "You start by letting go of the past. You can't change it, but you can change what comes next. You can rebuild piece by piece. It won't be easy, but you'll get there. I know you will." I wanted to believe her, wanted to cling to her words as though they were a lifeline in the storm I was sailing through. But a part of me still clung to the hope that things could somehow return to how they once were. That Charles could somehow wake up and see the destruction he had caused, see the pain he had inflicted on the people who loved him. But the truth was undeniable. He had chosen this path, and now it was my turn to choose mine. As I left the mansion, that night I felt the weight of the past fall away with each step. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't painless, but I was moving forward, one step at a time. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt free, free to create a life for myself, free to love again, and most importantly, free to let go of the man who had broken me, the man I had once loved so deeply. And as I drove away from that mansion, I looked up at the sky, the stars shining bright above me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I was no longer bound by the past. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, and I would do it with strength, courage, and the love of the family I had left as I drove further away. From the mansion, the night sky stretched before me, vast and unending. The streets were quiet, with only the occasional car passing by, their headlights illuminating the road ahead. I felt strangely detached from everything that had happened, like I was floating above the chaos, watching it unfold from a distance. The wind in my hair and the hum of the car engine were the only things keeping me grounded in that moment. I had always been the type to carry my burdens silently, to keep everything under control, to show the world that I could handle it all. But tonight, as I drove alone, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. It wasn't just physical fatigue, it was emotional, deep, and all-encompassing. It had been building for months, years even, but I had never let myself feel it fully until now. Now, it was as if all the walls I had built up around my heart were starting to crumble, and I didn't know if I was ready for that. The headlights of my car sliced through the darkness, casting long shadows on the road ahead. I kept my hands firmly on the wheel, trying to focus on the journey, on anything that would distract me from the turmoil inside. But my thoughts kept returning to the same place, the mansion. The house that had once been a symbol of our life together, of our family, now felt like a hollow shell. Charles and Emily were in there, living a life I could never be a part of, and for a moment I felt a pang of bitterness toward them. They were free to live their lives without consequence, without a care in the world, while I was left to pick up the pieces of mine. The car slowed as I approached the bridge over the river. The lights of the city twinkled in the distance, but all I could see was the reflection of my own face in the rearview mirror. It was a face I barely recognized. The lines around my eyes were more pronounced now, and my expression had hardened over the years. The woman who had once been full of dreams and hope now seemed weary, as though the weight of life's disappointments had taken its toll. As I crossed the bridge, I felt a strange sense of finality, as if the river below had somehow separated the past from the future, marking a boundary that I could never cross again. The life I had known was on one side, and the life I was about to build for myself was on the other. The thought terrified me, yet it also brought a strange sense of liberation. I wasn't sure what I wanted yet, but I knew I had to find out. I couldn't stay in this place of emotional limbo any longer. I needed to start over. I pulled into the driveway of my new house, modest, two-story place, in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. There was no mansion here, no memories of a life that had fallen apart. It was just me, my children, and the promise of a new beginning. The front porch light flickered in the darkness as I got out of the car and walked up the steps. The door opened as I reached for the handle, and I was met with the sight of Sarah, standing there with a concerned expression on her face. "Mum, are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. I smiled weakly, trying to reassure her. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just thinking," she nodded, but I could see the concern still in her eyes. She had been through so much herself, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The last thing I wanted was to burden her with my own confusion and pain. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked, her voice gentle. I hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Maybe later. Right now, I just need some time to figure things out." She nodded again, accepting my response without pushing further. "I'm here for you, Mom, always." I felt a lump form in my throat, and I swallowed hard. To keep my composure, my children, my strength, they had become my anchor in all of this. And despite everything that had happened, despite the betrayals and the heartache, I knew I had to be strong for them. They deserved more than what Charles had given them, more than what I had given them when I stayed in a broken marriage for far too long. As Sarah disappeared into the living room, I took a moment to stand in the hallway, the weight of the house around me settling in. There was a certain stillness here that I hadn't felt in the mansion. It was quieter, almost peaceful, but the silence was both comforting and unsettling. It was a reminder that I was no longer living for the man who had shattered my world. It was time to reclaim my own life, to live for myself and my children. Made my way upstairs to my room, where the walls were bare and the furniture minimal. It wasn't the mansion with its grand staircases and elegant decor, but it was mine. The simplicity of it was exactly what I needed. I stood in the center of the room, taking a deep breath. There was a new chapter waiting for me, and it was time to begin writing it. The next few days passed in a blur of routine work. Dinner, helping Sarah with her school projects, and doing everything I could to make the house feel like home. But as the days turned into weeks, the questions I had buried deep inside started to resurface. What had gone wrong? Why hadn't I seen it coming? How had I missed the signs? And, most importantly, why did I still feel this nagging ache in my heart when I thought about Charles? I knew I had to find closure, but every time I thought about confronting him again, I felt the fear creep back in. Fear of what I might say, fear of what I might hear. I wasn't sure I could handle any more betrayal, any more lies. But deep down, I knew that if I didn't find some sort of resolution, I would never be able to truly move on. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I found myself standing by the phone, the urge to call Charles pulling at me. My fingers hovered over the dial, and for a long moment, I stared at his name in my contacts list. I hadn't spoken to him since the night at the mansion, and I wasn't sure what I even wanted to say. What could I say that hadn't already been said? The damage was done. The trust was broken. And yet, the desire for answers lingered. With a sigh, I put the phone down. It wasn't time yet. Maybe it never would be. But that was okay. I didn't need him to give me closure. I would find it for myself. I had to. The weeks went by, and slowly but surely, I began to feel something shift inside me. It was as if I had been in a deep sleep, and now I was waking up. The numbness, the sadness, the anger, they were still there, but they no longer controlled me. I was starting to take back control of my own life, to chart a new course for myself and my children. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the weight of it all still felt unbearable. But I was moving forward, one step at a time. As time passed, I began to see the possibility of happiness again. Not in the way I had once imagined, with Charles by my side, but in a different, more profound way. Happiness that came from within, from the strength I had found in myself, from the love of my children, and from the sense of independence I was slowly reclaiming. The mansion, with its memories and its betrayals, was fading in the distance, and in its place was a future filled with new possibilities. And no matter what came next, I knew that I was strong enough to face it. Days turned into weeks, and the days started to blur into a quiet rhythm. I had allowed myself to settle into the routine, to find solace in the simplicity of my new life. Each day, I became a little bit stronger, a little more certain of the path I was on. My children adjusted, too, though the silence in the house was still different from the noise that used to fill the halls of the mansion. But we made it work. We had no choice but to make it work. I kept myself busy, diving into my work more than ever, finding distractions that helped keep the thoughts of Charles and everything that had happened in the past from consuming me. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since before everything fell apart. I had always found comfort in creating, in using my hands to express the emotions I didn't know how to put into words. Each brushstroke, each color, helped me process the pain, and I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders, piece by piece. But there were still nights when I lay awake, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't quiet. The nights when the pain felt sharp again, when the memories of Charles, of the love we once shared, felt like they were suffocating me. Those nights, I couldn't stop the tears from falling. I didn't want to cry anymore. I wanted to be free from it all, but sometimes the weight of what had been lost was too much to bear. One night, as I lay staring at the ceiling, I got a message on my phone. I didn't recognize the number, but the message itself was unmistakable. Need to talk to you. It's important. I knew immediately who it was. Charles. For a moment, my heart raced. What could he possibly want now? Hadn't he already done enough to hurt me, to make me feel small? What could he say that would change anything? But then there was another feeling that surged through me, a feeling of curiosity, of needing to hear him out, to understand what had driven him to this point. My mind fought against it, but my heart still ached for the man I had once loved, the man who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And so I found myself typing out a response, not fully sure of what I wanted to say. What is it, Charles? The seconds that followed felt like hours. And then the message came. I'm sorry, I've messed everything up. I need to explain. I sat there for a long time, staring at the words on my phone. What did he mean? Was this another attempt to manipulate me, to make me feel sorry for him, to get me to come back? Or was this something different? A small part of me wanted to pick up the phone, to call him, to hear him explain himself, to listen to his words, and see if they had any meaning, any truth behind them. But I couldn't. I couldn't keep doing this to myself. I couldn't keep allowing him to have this power over me. Not anymore. I put the phone down, letting out a shaky breath. I knew what I had to do. I had to let go. I had to stop waiting for the apology, for the explanation, for the closure that I thought I needed. I had already begun moving forward. I was building something for myself, something real. I didn't need him to validate my worth or my strength. I had done that on my own. It took everything in me to delete the message, to block his number, to sever the last thread that connected me to him. But I did it. I had to, for me, for my children. The following week, I decided to take a weekend getaway to clear my head. It wasn't far, just a cabin in the woods. A few hours away, I told Sarah and the younger kids I needed some time alone to think. They understood, though Sarah looked at me with a mixture of concern and hesitation. She knew something was still wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to explain it to her. Not yet. Not when I was still finding my own way. I spent the weekend in solitude, hiking through the woods, journaling, and just sitting by the lake, letting the sound of the water wash over me. It was peaceful. It was exactly what I needed to regain some semblance of balance. I spent hours reflecting on everything that had happened, on what Charles had done, on the betrayal and the heartbreak, but also on the resilience I had found within myself. I thought about the future that I had once believed would be built with him, but now I saw a new future, one that didn't involve him at all. On the final morning of my trip, I sat on the porch of the cabin, the early morning mist rising from the lake, and I felt something I hadn't felt in so long: hope. It was the smallest spark at first, a tiny ember that flickered in my chest, but it was enough to make me believe again. Hope that I could build a life without Charles. Hope that I could learn to love myself again. Hope that my children and I could move forward stronger than before. I returned home that afternoon, feeling lighter, more at peace with myself than I had in months. The house, though still filled with the quiet, was no longer suffocating. It was ours, completely ours. My children were adjusting, and I could see them beginning to find their own rhythm, their own strength. It wasn't perfect, and there were days when the silence felt heavy, but we were making it through. Together, Sarah had been quiet lately, retreating into herself more often than usual. I knew she was struggling, too, but she wasn't ready to talk about it. And I didn't push. I knew that in time, she would open up when she was ready. I was there for her, just as I had always been, and that was enough for now. One evening, a few weeks after my return from the trip, I was sitting in the kitchen making dinner when Sarah came into the room. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching me as I chopped vegetables, and then she spoke, her voice hesitant. "Mum, do you think we'll be okay?" I looked at her, setting down the knife, and walked over to her. She was growing up so fast, and I could see the weight of what we had been through reflected in her eyes. She was hurting, too, but she was strong. She had to be, just like me. "Yes," I said, my voice steady, reassuring. "We'll be okay, Sarah. We're already better than okay. We're going to be stronger than we ever were before. I promise." She smiled, a small but genuine smile, and wrapped her arms around me. I held her tightly, feeling the weight of everything we had been through, everything we had lost, but also everything we had gained. We were going to be okay. We were going to build our lives again, and this time, we wouldn't let anyone take that away from us. As I held my daughter, I realized that the healing had already begun. Not because of anything Charles had done or said, but because of everything I had done for myself, for my children. The love I had given them, the love I had found for myself, was enough. And that was all that mattered. In time, the past would become nothing more than a memory, a lesson learned. The mansion, the betrayal, the pain, none of it would define me. I would define myself, and I would create the life I had always dreamed of. A life filled with love, strength, and peace. The journey wasn't easy, but it was mine. And that made all the difference. As the months passed, the pain began to subside, not because it had disappeared, but because I had learned how to carry it. I had learned how to live alongside it without letting it consume me. The life I had once known, the life I had built with Charles, was slipping further into the past. The memories were still there, but they no longer had the power to control me. I started to explore parts of myself that I had neglected for years. I rediscovered my love for reading, something that had been pushed aside when I became consumed by the chaos of our broken marriage. I spent long evenings curled up in my favorite armchair, the soft light of a lamp illuminating the pages of novels that transported me to different worlds, far removed from the one I had left behind. Books became a refuge for me, a place where I could find solace and escape. I also found joy in the small things again. The way the sun filtered through the trees in the morning, casting golden light across the front yard. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the house on quiet Sunday mornings. The sound of my children laughing as they played together in the backyard. These were the moments that mattered now. These were the moments that made life worth living. One evening, as I was sitting at the kitchen table, working on a new project, Sarah came in. She had been distant lately, and I could tell something was on her mind. She hesitated for a moment before speaking, her eyes filled with a mixture of uncertainty and vulnerability. "Mum, I've been thinking a lot lately," she began, her voice soft. "About Dad, about everything." I put my pen down, turning my full attention to her. She had always been a sensitive soul, and I knew that the emotions she had been carrying were just as heavy as mine. "I know you miss him," I said gently. "But sweetheart, you have to understand that what he did wasn't right. You deserve better than that. We both do. She nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. I know, Mum, but it's hard. I still love him, and I don't know how to stop. My heart broke for her. I had felt that same love for Charles, that same sense of longing, even after everything that had happened. It was a part of me that I couldn't just turn off. But I knew I had to teach Sarah that love wasn't always enough. Sometimes, love wasn't enough to fix the broken pieces of a person. Sometimes, you had to walk away, no matter how much it hurt. I know it's hard, I whispered, reaching out to take her hand. It's okay to love him, but you also need to understand that love isn't about staying in a place that hurts you. It's about finding peace within yourself, about healing and growing. You're allowed to love him, but you also have to protect your heart, sweetheart. She leaned into me, and we sat there in silence for a long time. I could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders, and I wished there was more I could do to ease her pain. But all I could do was be there for her, to show her that it was okay to feel what she was feeling, and that eventually the pain would ease. As the days turned into weeks, I began to notice subtle changes in Sarah. She seemed lighter, more at ease. She was still struggling with her emotions, still processing everything that had happened, but she was beginning to accept the reality of it all. It was a slow process, but it was progress. I was proud of her. One day, Sarah came to me with a question that I hadn't been prepared for. She was holding her phone, and there was a look of hesitation on her face. "Mum," she began carefully, "Dad wants to see me. He's been asking for a while, and I don't know what to do. I don't know if I'm ready." Her words took me by surprise, and my heart sank. I had always known that the day would come when Charles would try to re-enter our lives, but I hadn't anticipated it happening so soon. I wasn't sure what to tell her. I didn't want her to feel torn between us, between the love she still felt for her father and the hurt he had caused. But I also knew that I couldn't protect her from everything. She had to make her own choices, even if they weren't the ones I would have made. "Sarah," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, "I can't tell you what to do. You have to decide what's best for you. But I want you to understand that you don't owe him anything. He hurt you, and he hurt me. If you choose to see him, you need to be sure it's what you want, not because you feel like you have to." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I don't know if I can forgive him, Mum, but I still miss him. I still want him in my life." "I understand," I said softly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean you have to let someone back into your life if it's not what's best for you. You can forgive him for you, not for him, and you can choose to move forward, no matter what." The conversation hung in the air, and I could see that Sarah was still grappling with her emotions. It wasn't something that could be resolved in a single conversation. It was something she would have to work through on her own. But I knew one thing for certain: no matter what decision she made, I would be there for her, supporting her every step of the way as the weeks turned into months. The idea of Charles trying to make amends became a distant echo in the back of my mind. I had been so consumed by the anger, the betrayal, and the hurt that I hadn't fully realized how much I had changed, how much I had grown. And now I was beginning to see things from a different perspective. I started dating again, something I hadn't expected to happen so soon. At first it felt strange, almost like I was betraying the memories of my past. But I soon realized that it wasn't about replacing Charles. It was about finding happiness for myself again. It was about rediscovering the parts of me that I had lost in the shadow of our marriage, the man I started seeing wasn't perfect, but he was kind, supportive, and respectful. He didn't expect me to be anything other than myself. And with him, I began to remember what it felt like to laugh, to feel light, to be in the moment. He wasn't a solution to all my problems, but he was a reminder that life could still be beautiful, even after everything had fallen apart. But it wasn't just the romance that was changing. MIT was everything. My relationship with my children had grown stronger. We had become a team, a unit that had weathered the storm together. And I could see that Sarah, despite her hesitation and uncertainty, was starting to heal. She was becoming more confident, more assured of who she was, and I was proud of her. I was proud of all of us. I had found peace, not because everything had gone according to plan, but because I had accepted the messy, painful reality of it all. Life wasn't perfect, but it was still worth living, and I was ready to live it fully, without the chains of my past weighing me down. One evening, after dinner, Sarah came to me again, her face a little brighter than before. She had been spending time with her father recently, but there was no longer that look of sadness and confusion in her eyes. She had found her own way to navigate the relationship on her own terms. "Mum," she said, her voice full of warmth, "I think I'm going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed her. We all were going to be okay. As the seasons changed, so did our lives. The once distant past seemed to grow softer, its edges becoming less jagged. Time had worked its quiet magic, smoothing out the sharpness of my memories. But it had also done something else. It had made me stronger, stronger than I had ever believed possible. I had emerged from the wreckage of my old life, not unscathed, but healed in ways I hadn't expected. One spring morning, as I watched the sun rise over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the backyard, I realized that I had found a new rhythm, a new normal. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, days when I would feel a deep, inexplicable sadness over what I had lost, over the family I had once thought would last forever. But those days were fewer, and the good days filled with laughter, with love, with peace were growing more abundant. I had come to appreciate the small moments, the quiet victories that had once seemed insignificant, the way my children had begun to find their own strength, their own voices, the way Sarah had blossomed into someone who was no longer defined by her past. She had started going to therapy, something I had suggested to her, but she had embraced it on her own terms, and slowly I saw the change in her. She was becoming the person she was always meant to be: strong, compassionate, and unafraid to face her own pain. And me, I was no longer waiting for something to happen. I was making things happen. I had started a new business, a small venture that I had dreamed of for years, but had always pushed aside. It was my way of reclaiming my independence, of proving to myself that I didn't need anyone to define my worth. I had worked hard, learning everything I could, building my confidence with every small success. And now I was watching my business grow, slowly but steadily. It was a reminder that I was capable, that I could build something meaningful on my own. But even as I was finding my footing, the past still lingered, like an old shadow that followed me everywhere I went. Charles was still in the picture, though less so than before. He had made attempts to reconnect, to apologize, but each time he reached out, I felt a deep sense of finality wash over me. He wasn't the man I had loved. The man I had once trusted had evaporated, leaving only a stranger in his place. And yet I could not completely escape the pull of him. There were moments, small, fleeting moments, when I would wonder about the life we could have had. What if things had been different? What if we hadn't drifted apart? But those moments were rare, and with each passing day, I found it easier to silence those questions, to remind myself that I was better off without him, without his lies, without his deceit, without the constant pain of trying to make something, work that was never meant to. It wasn't easy, not by any means. There were still moments when I would wake up in the middle of the night, a sense of panic rising in my chest as I remembered the depth of the betrayal. But those moments grew fewer, and I found ways to push them aside. I would think about my children, about the life we were building together, and that was enough to keep me moving forward. Sarah had grown into someone I admired deeply. She had found a way to love herself despite the hurt she had endured. She was strong in ways I hadn't realized, capable of facing her own demons and making peace with her past. She was still figuring things out, still learning how to navigate her relationship with her father. But I knew she was strong enough to find her own path. One afternoon, after she returned from a therapy session, she came into the kitchen with a quiet, reflective look on her face. "Mum," she said, sitting down across from me, "I think I've made my decision." I looked up, intrigued, but I didn't say anything. I had learned not to rush her, not to push her for answers she wasn't ready to give. "I think I'm ready to let go," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've been holding on to this anger, this pain for so long, and I think it's time to release it. Not for him, but for me. I need to forgive him, even if I don't ever want him back in my life." Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached across the table to take her hand. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered, squeezing her hand tightly. "You don't have to forgive him for him. You forgive him for you, so you can be free of the weight he's put on your heart." Sarah smiled, a small but genuine smile, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the peace in her eyes. The peace I had been waiting for her to find. Over time, things started to fall into place. My business continued to thrive, and I was able to expand my circle of influence, working with people who shared my vision, my passion. I had made new friends, people who had become my support system. I was no longer alone, but I had chosen my company carefully, surrounding myself with those who lifted me up, rather than those who had drained me in the past. And while Charles remained a distant part of our lives, he no longer had the power to break me. I had broken free from him, from the toxic hold he had once had over me, and I was stronger for it. There were moments when I still had to remind myself of that, when the old wounds would resurface, but they no longer held the same sting. The hurt was there, but it didn't define me anymore. One night, as I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine, looking out the window at the stars, I found myself thinking back on everything that had happened. The pain, the heartache, the betrayal, but also the growth, the healing, the strength. It was impossible to deny that the person I was now was far different from the woman I had been just a year ago. I had come through the storm, and though I was scarred, I was whole. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. I glanced at the screen and saw that it was Sarah's school. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly answered, my mind racing with thoughts of what could be wrong. "Hello," I asked, my voice tense. "Hi, is this Mrs. Morrison?" The voice on the other end said, "Yes," I replied, my heart still pounding. "Is everything okay?" The voice seemed calm, but there was an underlying concern. "We just wanted to let you know that Sarah has been nominated for a leadership award. She's being recognized for her efforts in the school community, her kindness, and her personal growth. Tears sprang to my eyes as I sank back into the chair. I was overwhelmed with pride, with joy. I had watched my daughter struggle, watched her wrestle with the aftermath of everything that had happened, and now, here she was, being recognized for the very things I had always known about her: her strength, her kindness, her resilience. "That's amazing," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much for letting me know." As I hung up the phone, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life I had created. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't what I had once imagined, but it was mine, and it was enough. The journey had been long, and there were still moments of pain, moments of longing for what had been lost. But I had learned how to live without the weight of that loss dragging me down. I had learned how to forgive not just Charles, but myself as well. I had learned to rebuild piece by piece, and in the process, I had found a strength I never knew I had. As I sat there, looking out at the stars, I realized that while I couldn't change the past, I could shape the future, and the future, for the first time in a long time, felt full of possibility. I was no longer defined by the man who had broken my heart. I was defined by the woman I had become, the woman who had learned to heal, to forgive, to move forward, and that was more than enough.